Big issues of the day. Steve N. Allen, the comedian and broadcaster, is with us. In fact, live in the studio as well. I forgot what you look like, Steve.
Yeah.
I see you down a screen. We've known each other for a few years, but haven't seen you in the flesh for...
Yeah, you've not seen my legs in a while. You see the face an awful lot.
See the face, not your legs.
I thought you'd be impressed by what I've been doing with those quads.
I'm very impressed. I mean, no one is more so impressed than myself, I think you will find. So, part of the NHS reforms, Health Minister Wes Streeting is planning to sack chiefs who don't cut waiting lists. Let's have a little listen first to Wes Streeting explaining his plans to reform the NHS just last month.
We will be doing in a matter of days is sending a crack team of clinicians into those hospitals in areas where not only are there high waiting lists, but high numbers of people who are both off work, off sick, and therefore, by bringing waiting lists down, we'll be helping people back to health and back to work.
I mean, that's kind of stating the obvious, really, isn't it? By bringing waiting lists down, we'll treat people quicker. Oh, great. I love that logic.
Yeah, I mean, look, I like the noises.
If there's less of a queue, you'll get treated faster, you know?
Yeah, and if we can bunch those people in the queue closer to each other, it won't look as long. They could do that one as well.
That's a good one.
That's another way of getting the
That's what they need to
queues.
do. Get people to queue properly.
Well, this is why he wants to inject everyone with the other one that's not Ozempic. It will make the waiting lists shorter by the fact that everyone's belly will be slightly smaller.
True enough.
It's got many good ideas.
Those A&E departments will look virtually barren,
yeah,
won't they?
there's no one here.
There's no one here.
I mean, I like the sound, I like the noises, I like the idea of saying, yes, let's do something to sort out the efficiency. But there's no one who would say, do you know what I really like? Inefficiency.
Yes.
There's no actual pro-inefficiency team.
Yes. There's no previous health set. We've spoken to loads of them. Stephen Dorrell on with us the other day. Peter Lilly, goodness knows who else we've spoken to. I don't think, Tory or Labour, any of those health secretaries ever said, my big plan for this department is to be as inefficient as we possibly can.
Yeah, inefficient, wastefulness.
Waste as much as we can.
Wherever you are on the spectrum, left or right, you might think, I don't want there to be less money spent towards the NHS, but you all want it to be spent effectively, and as you say, not necessarily on, like, artwork in decor. You want more people to be treated so people don't have to wait as long with the painful diseases. We know about this. I'm just not sure the threat of sacking people will help. It sounds great. It's tough talk, and Wes knows you've got to make some tough talk to get some good headlines.
Be tough.
The Daily Mail needs to, not go in on you with both legs at the same time. So you've got to sound tough. The problem is, the two threats are you'll be fired if you don't keep your spending down, or you won't get the pay rises. That's great for, like, phase one, but phase two is people in those situations who are getting fired or are not getting the pay rises will leave that job. And then who do you get to go into that position where you can't really turn it around? So you're going to get fired in a year's time, or you won't get a pay rise. You'll get someone who's bad at the job in the health areas that need better expertise.
We're going to be speaking to an A&E consultant in about 15 minutes' time, and I think he's probably going to say to me, look, all of this stuff, fine, cut out the dead wood, get rid of bad managers, but none of that will actually affect the real problem, the coalface of the problem. And even £22.6 billion extra money, which was promised by Rachel Reeves, there's got to be some kind of systemic change in order to begin the process of this thing speeding up. And the smart money seems to say that it's going to get worse before it gets better. Yeah,
I mean, some of the spending I'm all for, because you know that when there was that IT scandal, it was a couple of years ago, and the NHS was hacked, it's because they were running Windows XP. And it just hits you like, you're kidding me.
Yeah.
I know pensioners who have better IT systems in their house, even though they have to get their son-in-law to do the Wi-Fi. Some of that needs a bit of money spending on it, because no wonder it's creaking and falling apart. Remember how long an XP machine took to boot up?
Unbelievable.
So all of that time, there's your waiting list cut, just by the fact that you can do instant log on if you're on Windows 11.
Well, also, a friend of mine was recently, and to this day, is having a lot of discussions with doctors and nurses, because one of his parents is being treated for really serious condition, and he said he met with some consultants. It was like a sort of Bird and Fortune sketch. He said it was just extraordinary. We're going to have to send a fax over to Moriarty. I don't know why I picked that name. Okay, well, my mate's going, well, so where you're sending a fax? A fax? Yes. Where is he? He's down the corridor.
Oh,
he's down the corridor? Well, why don't you go and see him? We're not allowed to do that.
Yeah.
Why can't you do that? Well, there's a protocol. We have to send a fax. So he gets the facts. Well, how do you know he's got the facts? He said, well, we walk down the corridor and check to see if he's got the facts. This is the NHS in the 21st century.
Yeah, and stuff like that will mean that when the fax machine breaks, as they did, I seem to remember, you need to get a fax repair person in. Well, that'll cost you through the nose, because who can repair a fax these days?
Frank the fax.
Yeah, the only person he works for is the NHS, because no one else is repairing these, and it'll be like 200 quid to get it repaired.
Absolutely.
You're right, absolutely. There's so many efficiencies that can be done, but you have to be aiming towards that goal and not just thinking, oh, this sounds nice.
Yeah, indeed. And I think ultimately as well, if you haven't got enough people working in it, doctors and nurses, then it doesn't matter how much money you put in, because you can't get these people out of thin air. I mean, there's years to train, and they are short to the tune of thousands. It's not like there's 7 vacancies they've got to fill.
Yeah.
Thousands.
What I don't understand, though, is this, and, you know, you're cleverer than me, see if you can fill this, the gaps in on this one. When they don't have enough staff for the NHS, they have to use agency staff.
Yes.
Why don't you hire...
the agency staff?
Because they exist. Otherwise, where are you getting them from?
That's a good point, because they always say, well, it's got that bad, we had to use the agency staff. Well, employ the agency staff.
£2 billion they spend on agency staff. Why don't you take £1 billion of that, pay them so handsomely, but you'd have saved yourself £1 billion and you'd have hired all these people.
Well, the agency staff like being agency staff because their wage is 3 times higher as agency staff, isn't it? But can't they just put a stop to the agency thing?
Yeah. No work for you unless you actually come and join. Yeah,
it's a bit like if you go to the private sector, you might meet the same bloke you saw in the NHS last week.
Just a different white coat.
I've been to see the surgeon about my tonsils, wasn't that pleased with him, so I've rang the Bupa people, I'm going to go and see them, and you turn up, it's the same bloke sitting behind the desk.
You're right, it would be a sketch.
On 10 times the money.
Yeah, it would be an absolute sketch, a comedy sketch, if it weren't people's actual health part of their lives being affected by this.
Just the man wearing a moustache, pretending it's not him at all.
Like a Tommy Cooper, one hat while he turns around. Different one.
Let's move on to another story. It's 17 minutes after 1. Archbishop of Canterbury, as we know, resigned yesterday over the Church of England child sex abuse scandal. There's lots to be said about this. Let's just have a listen, a reminder. This is back in 2019, 5 years ago. This is Justin Welby speaking about his knowledge then of the scandal.
I genuinely had no idea that there was anything as horrific as this going on. And the kind of story you showed on the clip, I mean, if I'd known that, I would have been very active, but I had no suspicions at all.
Well, he had no suspicions, but that was 2019 that we've just heard. He actually knew about this in 2013. Now, I don't know how bad it has to get. He's saying, you just showed me a clip and I didn't know it was that bad, but he must have known something in 2013.
Yeah.
And so did others. He wasn't the only person that knew.
And also, that clip proves he knew about it in 2019.
Yeah.
So I'm just sitting here looking at 2024, thinking, all right, so what happened in the interim?
For the 5 years.
Yeah, Stepper will resign by then. Why are we doing it now? I've got absolutely no sympathy in this story at all. The only thing I hope is that this becomes Welby's legacy. All those jokes about him being woke, forget it. That was nothing in comparison to dropping the ball on this. Yeah. And I know they try and say, like, oh, I presumed someone else was looking, there was oversight on this. That is nowhere near good. If that's okay if you've not reported a pothole, someone else has probably done it. But when you hear about the details of the abuse that happened, do you know what? Put a call in. You know, they say, like, make sure you call the police. It's better that more people call if you witnessed a crime.
Yes.
Better that 2 people call than none. Man, like, you were in charge of the church. You knew, as soon as you heard about this, don't go...
Shout very loudly.
Yeah. And don't think, well, I better not, there's already some oversight. Well, just maybe nudge the oversight people. So I've got absolutely no sympathy. What an abhorrent thing to fail.
Yes.
Your one job was to try and catch stuff like this, surely to
correct, yes.
Everything else is done, no one cares
also,
about it.
it's not as if by that stage, you know, that film Spotlight had been out, I know it was about the Catholic Church, but there've been other abuses. It's a kind of, you know, a well-known narrative that there are, you know, that within the church, people that have those kind of proclivities gravitate to those professions, whether it's, you know, in care homes or in church institutions where they have access to people that could be victims. So by 2013, we were all well aware that these things can happen. Yeah. And, you know, Welby's first response should have been, oh, it's one of those cases, this, you know, that we know about already, these kind of cases, because there have been others. I was talking yesterday on the programme how, you know, my local vicar when I was a kid, the guy that actually did the marriage for my sister and her husband, you know, ended up in jail for, you know, horrendous offences against children. this stuff is known, and they knew that it was there and did very little about it. I think also, you know, the groupthink thing. Matthew Said wrote that book called Black Box Thinking, which kind of talks, oddly, the Black Box Thinking begins with a chapter about the NHS, about how things don't get reported because there is a sort of a kind of group thing, there's an authority. You know, if you're a kind of junior in the operating theatre and there's Professor Smithers, the greatest neurosurgeon on the planet, and you saw him put a pipe in the wrong place of the patient, you don't want to report that, you know, because he's Professor Smith. It's that sort of thinking. Yeah. It's part cover-up, it's part fear, it's protecting the institution.
There was a thing about Japanese pilots as well, like commercial pilots, and there was such an authority hierarchy that if the co-pilot was witnessing something that would be a catastrophic crashing into the side of a mountain, they'd say nothing for fear of not upsetting.
Yes.
Well, come on, you're flying face first into a big lump of rock. Surely that's the time to speak. And this is exactly what you're talking about, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's all very well having this hierarchy, but you're right. I mean, look, as I pay most of my mortgage through stand-up comedy, many punchlines are ... something about religion, priests.
Yes. Yeah,
so you're right, we knew about it, and I think you're more charitable than I am. I think it's not groupthink, you don't want to offend the hierarchy. Part of it is also, let's try and keep a lid on this, we don't want the bad reputation.
Absolutely, yeah. You mentioned, say, is that one of your routines? 2 Japanese pilots.
I'd never work again.
Wait for Edinburgh next year. That's what it's going to be called. Steve Van Allen is with us.